Welcome back to the Age of Cathedrals. Last time, we left Peter Abelard with the idea of individualism, a concern with body and bodily appetites, a philosophy of God and of godlessness, a great relativism of perspective, and a means of negotiating social relations, which is highly verbal. I made use of my tongue instead of working with my hands, says Abelard, in a phrase which characterized one of the important aspects of social life in and around the cathedrals of the 12th and 13th centuries. These realist and urban values, which we glimpsed to some extent in Abelard's autobiography, The Story of My Misfortunes, are most fully realized in a series of mostly comic short verse tales written in Old French and known as the Fabliaux, or Little Fables. The Fabliaux are filled with the new people of the late 12th and 13th centuries, the artisans and craftsmen, the merchants and haulers of goods, the shopkeepers and bookkeepers, the students and wandering entertainers, the village priests and the monks, the lawyers and doctors, the rich bourgeois and low-life pimps and prostitutes who lived in the towns or came to the towns of North and Northwest France. These are people who survive and even who profit by their use of cleverness and wit, anticipation and quick thinking, cunning and daring, inventiveness and endurance, and above all, right timing in a new social milieu that is that of the city. We read together for today two representative fabliaux which involve priests who, like Abelard, gave in to the lusts of the flesh, but who, unlike Abelard, do not manage to transform their misfortunes into a higher brand of philosophy. We read a fabliau called The Crucified Priest and another called The Peekaboo Priest. The Crucified Priest is the story of a man named Roger, who could have supplied cathedrals with liturgical objects. He manufactures crucifixes and other religious statues for a living. Roger suspects his wife of having an affair with a local priest, so he invents a plan. Roger pretends to leave for work in order to trap them via an unexpected, quick return. His wife, carried away by passion, had taken a priest as lover. Her husband told her, as a cover, he had to go to market, so he'd bring a statuette in tow to drop off for a tidy profit. And she agreed promptly enough. It elated her to see him leave, and he was not slow to perceive the joyful look by which he knew she had in mind to be untrue. Once the wife and her priest lover have sat down to dinner, the husband returns, and the priest, not knowing what to do, is advised by the clever wife to go into her husband's workshop, to take off his clothes, and to assume a pose among her husband's holy carvings, which he does. Right willingly, or with misgivings, the priest obeyed her then and there. Without his clothes, completely bare, among the images he stood as if he'd been carved out of wood. The husband, meanwhile, decides that he might as well take it slow. He drinks and has a bite. Then, sharpening a knife, he asks his wife to help him inspect a recent carving in the workroom. No word of protest did she dare, but with her husband made her way directly to his atelier, holding a candle to give light. The master carver soon caught sight of the priest with his arms stretched out, whom he could spot beyond a doubt, seeing his hanging cock and balls. "Lady," he said, "how it appalls me, this indecent crucifix. Such holy objects don't have pricks. I must have had too much to drink. Some light, I'll fix it in a wink." The terrified priest never stirred. The husband, you can take my word, cut off the prelate's genitalia and left him nothing, without failure, to warrant further amputation. Realizing that he had better flee than that the husband should keep on carving, the castrated concupiscent priest begins to run down the street, where he is apprehended by two ruffians who beat him until he pays 15 pounds ransom. This little Fabliaux ends with a moral. This parable has demonstrated, no matter who is implicated, in no case should a clergyman mess with the wife of any man, or hang around her, I allege. He'll leave his balls there as a pledge, just as the priest, Father Constance, left his 3 hanging ornaments. On the one hand, one might read this concluding moral in terms of Orthodox Christian morality. One should remain faithful to the marriage bed or pay the consequences. But this is really a stretch, and I think there's something else more interesting happening here. And this has to do with the relationship of the sacred to the profane, or of the symbols of the sacred, the symbols which should be sacred, to the debased forms of exchange which triumph in the end. I realize I'm getting a little abstract, so let me be more precise. The castrated priest is not a tale without religious symbolism, which lies, in fact, at its core. I'm thinking of the crucifix, which can only stand as a visual representation of the most sacred Christian mystery. And yet, the crucifix in this particular tale is reduced to the status of an object of exchange, which the husband makes and hopes to sell at market for a profit. Roger is, after all, the opposite of a priest, the one who is supposed to administer the sacraments. A master carver, as we learn at the outset, he is an artist, moreover, who is unionized. He had the skills one needs to make statues and crucifixes. He had joined the guild and artfully carved sculptures in the finest fashion. The religious object in the Fabliaux has no more sacred value. It is not used to inspire those who attend church, those who take Mass and the sacraments. It is a buying and selling crucifix and not a worshiping crucifix. So too, the priest is not a praying priest full of pastoral care, but a worldly, amorous priest full of sexual desire, Father Constance. One who's playing at being Christ ends in another economic exchange. For the husband who pretends to leave a statuette in tow to drop off for a tidy profit ends up bartering with the priest who pretends to be a statue over his own life after he has already removed the bit of excess material that is supposedly the source of sin. Compare for a moment, if you will, this supposedly comic castration with the seriousness we've seen attached to that of Abelard. In the one instance, the castration inflicted by Fulbert's men upon Abelard is the source not only of humiliation, but of deep metaphysical anguish. The castration of Father Constance, however, is the source of humor and of money, for it is clear that Roger, the master carver, member of a guild and clever businessman, has turned even his own cuckoldry to profit in this world in which urban values of wit, persistence, and cleverness win in the end.